For centuries, the story of Eve being created from Adam's rib has been repeated and retold, becoming a near unchallengeable truth. However, what is astonishing is that this idea is entirely absent from the original Hebrew Bible. In the original text, the word used is not rib, but tsela, tsela, a term with far deeper and more symbolic meaning. This word appears over 40 times in the Torah, and in all of those instances, except Genesis 2:21, it is always translated as a side, a flank, or one side, as in the architectural structure of the temple or other sacred spaces. The translation of Tsela as rib occurs only in the passage about the creation of Eve, a choice that is not merely a linguistic error, but one filled with symbolic, political, and theological implications. This mistranslation helps shape a worldview that places men at the center and sees women as derivative, secondary, not as a sacred half, but as a piece taken out from man. It distorts the real meaning of the human creation story. Meanwhile, mystical traditions like Kabbalah interpret Tsela as symbolizing division, the splitting of two energetic poles of existence, male, female, active, receptive, giving, receiving. This division is not a loss, but an act of creation intended to reflect the divine symmetry of humanity. The first human was not male, but a complete being carrying both aspects. And Eve was not a piece of bone, but the embodiment of the latent soul within Adam, brought into light. This is the emergence of the other, the beginning of relationship, dialogue, and the spiritual journey. Thus, understanding the word Tsela correctly is not just a linguistic correction. It is an effort to restore a hidden truth, that human beings were created in unity and symmetry, and that gender duality is part of a divine plan to manifest wholeness. Scholar Aviva Zornberg once said, "When Eve was created from one side, Tsela, of Adam, it was not simply a physical separation. It was the moment when difference was born, a divine act that paved the way for dialogue, desire, and relationship." The event of Eve being separated should not be understood as her coming out of man, but rather as the birth of duality, male and female, self and other. It is within that difference that humanity begins to learn to recognize and to love. Kabbalah, the mystical branch of Judaism, interprets this event as a profoundly symbolic act. According to it, Adam was initially a unified being containing both male and female. The separation of Eve was not to make her dependent, but so that both could see each other, mirror each other, and through that learn love, understanding, and reunification at a deeper level, through freedom, will, and awareness. If we understand Tsela as one side, this also implies that Adam, and more broadly, every human, is always missing a part. Each person is searching for their other side, not only in romantic love, but also in connection with others, in the spiritual journey, and in community building. No one is whole alone. From that sense of incompleteness, the yearning to connect and to love arises. The mistranslation of Tsela as rib has caused a major distortion in social perception, especially regarding the role and value of women. It created an unequal structure lasting for centuries. However, when returning to the original meaning and grasping the deep symbolism of the story, we realize that woman was not created from some insignificant or minor part of man, but from a sacred half, equal, symmetrical, and essential. The story of Eve, therefore, is not a story of dependence, but a story of the birth of relationship. Within that separation lies an invitation to seek a deeper unity, where the self meets the other, and love becomes the bridge between two halves of humanity. One often overlooked detail in Eve's creation is that Adam was in a deep sleep when God created the woman. This state is not merely physical sleep, but symbolic, a suspension of consciousness, a transcendent moment in which the ego lets go of control to allow something new and different to be born. Kabbalistic tradition explains that Adam could not witness the moment of Eve's creation because humans cannot see the formation of the other from themselves in a waking state. Had Adam witnessed the process, he might have believed Eve was just a dependent part, an extension of himself. But as he slept, Eve was formed as an independent being, someone with will, awareness, and identity of her own. True love cannot arise from control or possession. It emerges when we are able to see the other as an other, not as an extension of ourselves. Thus, Adam's sleep was a prerequisite for a relationship to form on the basis of freedom and equality. In the temporary absence of the ego, space is made for the other to enter. At a deeper level, this moment reflects a spiritual truth. True creation does not happen in control, but in surrender. When we step back, when the self recedes, something new can be born. Just like in meditation or art, inspiration and life emerge from emptiness, from a space where we are not trying to control, but are simply open to receive. Therefore, Adam's sleep is not a sign of weakness or passivity, but a sacred yielding, a retreat that makes room for the other to come into being. And from that moment, a new relationship is formed, not one of subject and object, but an encounter between two beings, different but equal, distinct but bound together. That is the true foundation for love and human connection. The act of God bringing Eve to Adam is a deeply symbolic detail. This act shows that the meeting between Adam and Eve did not happen randomly or spontaneously, but was the result of a deliberate and sacred arrangement. In that gesture, God takes on the role of the first matchmaker, not in a social sense, but in a spiritual one, facilitating a meaningful encounter between two people. The moment Adam awoke and saw Eve was a revelatory moment. He exclaimed, "This is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." This declaration is not an expression of ownership, but of recognition, a profound empathy about the shared nature of their humanity. Adam did not see Eve as a foreign object, but as a reflection, not of himself alone, but of humanity as a whole. This marked the transition from Adam's initial solitude to an intersubjective existence. He was no longer alone, for he had encountered an other who was also himself. However, this recognition does not erase the difference between them. It is precisely in difference that connection becomes more profound. Eve was not made from the dust like Adam, but from his side, an element located near the center of the body, close to the heart, not from the head to dominate, nor from the feet to be trampled. This is a symbolic image of equality and intimacy. The other is not above or below, but beside to walk together. God bringing Eve to Adam also conveys the message that meaningful encounters are a gift. In human life, no one can create a genuine relationship alone. Deep and meaningful encounters often come as gifts, something we cannot force, but only receive. And in that reception, we learn how to love, not through possessive will, but through gratitude and reverence for the other's difference and freedom. When God brings the woman to the man, it is not only a sacred act at the beginning of humanity, but a revelation about the nature of human relationships. Adam, upon seeing Eve, did not react with possession or domination. On the contrary, he uttered a recognition filled with wonder and joy. "This is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh." This was not a claim of possession, but a full and respectful acknowledgement of the other, one who is also human like him, but not him. It is in that difference that authentic relationship can arise. Eve is not a copy or extension of Adam, but an independent human being with her own freedom and dignity. The difference in gender here is not just a biological fact, but the manifestation of a deeper dimension. Human beings are called to live in relation, not isolation. The I only becomes fully itself when it encounters and reflects the other. And through that difference, a real relationship, not sameness, can be born. Notably, God's act of bringing Eve to Adam also reveals a foundational truth. The relationship between human beings is not the result of manipulation or personal strategy, but a gift, something that cannot be self-generated. Humans cannot create others to fill themselves, but can only receive them as grace. In this reception, gratitude and reverence become the basis for all authentic relationships. This presents a great challenge in modern society, where relationships are easily commodified, consumerized, or controlled at will. The primal experience of Adam and Eve reminds us that true encounters begin with accepting limits, opening to difference, and recognizing the other not as a means but as a mystery, an invitation we are called to enter with respect and sincere love. From the creation narrative in Genesis, we recognize a foundational truth. Human beings were made for relationship. None of us were created to live alone. Adam truly discovered himself only when he encountered Eve, one who was bone of his bones, but also entirely different. That difference is not for division, but for complementarity and mutual enrichment. In that original state, the relationship between man and woman was not corrupted by lust, possession, or domination, but was expressed as a complete communion where both freely and lovingly gave themselves to each other. In that light, the human body is no longer something shameful or evil, but the medium of love. The body becomes the language of self-gift, a space through which one expresses attachment, emotion, and especially the ability to offer oneself to the other. When Adam said, "This is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh," he was using the language of the body to express a sacred and mysterious bond with Eve. It was not merely physical attraction, but a deep recognition of the value and dignity of the other within a loving relationship. However, the body is not just a biological fact. It also carries theological dimensions. It reveals the depths of the soul, love, and human freedom. When love is real, the body is no longer an object for self-satisfaction, but a means of self-gift. This is especially clear in marriage. When two people give themselves completely in body, it is a sign of a total union. Not just physical, but also spiritual, volitional, and existential. Thus, the body must be respected, not only for its natural value, but because it is where God wishes to dwell and act. Purity in relationship is not the rejection of the body, but the living of the body with reverence, with true love, and with the awareness that it is where God calls us to deeper communion, with others and with himself. Love is not just a fleeting emotion or mutual attraction. In the light of Scripture and the theology of the body, true love is a vocation, a journey of growth, where one is called to freely, generously, and fully offer oneself. Pope John Paul II emphasized that true love never separates from responsibility. When we say, "I love you," it must come with a commitment, a promise. I want the best for you, and I will strive for it. In this sense, love is where one transcends oneself, moving beyond selfishness into a communion with another. Love becomes not how I feel, but I choose to live for you. In that choice, love is purified, matures, and bears fruit, both spiritually and physically. That is why true love always involves sacrifice. Without sacrifice, love easily falls into superficiality, sentimentality, and transience. Another key point Pope John Paul II stressed is the difference between love and use. When we use others as a means for our satisfaction, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, it is no longer love. True love is when we recognize the dignity in the other and cherish them as an end in themselves. It is in that attitude of respect and self-gift that love becomes a reflection of God's own love, a love that gives without expecting return, that always seeks the good of the beloved. Such love requires time, patience, and maturity. It cannot blossom from haste or impulse, but must be cultivated through dialogue, mutual understanding, and the pursuit of a shared purpose. When two people love in truth, they also help each other move toward God, the source of all love. Through that, human love not only brings earthly happiness, but opens the door to eternal life. One of the great challenges of modern humanity is the divide between body and soul, between faith and daily experiences, especially in sexuality and emotional relationships. Through the theology of the body, Pope John Paul II invites us to overcome this divide by rediscovering the deep unity between body and soul, between human love and divine love. He emphasizes that the human body is not merely material reality, but a sacrament, a visible sign expressing invisible truths. Through the body, humans are called to live a love like God's love, a love that gives, receives, and bears fruit. Sexuality in this light is not merely a biological drive, but of the desire to give oneself completely to another, not only physically, but also emotionally, spiritually, and existentially. It is within the marital relationship, lived in fidelity and total self-giving, that sexuality reaches its full meaning, becoming not a tool for pleasure, but a sacred act that participates in divine love. This perspective radically opposes the modern view that often separates sex from love and love from responsibility. Today, sexuality is frequently reduced to consumption, to immediate gratification, to self-fulfillment without commitment. Such a view ultimately leads to inner emptiness because it does not correspond to the true nature of the human person, who is made not to consume others, but to love and be loved. The theology of the body reminds us that every person is a unity of body and soul. The way we live our physical reality affects our spiritual journey, and vice versa. When we treat the body as a sacred temple and sexuality as a gift, we begin to live with greater awareness and integrity. The human body is not shameful or sinful, but it needs to be sanctified by love and truth, to become a vessel that carries divine grace. Pope John Paul II taught that the human body speaks. It has its own language. And when that language is spoken in truth, it becomes the language of love, of total self-donation. But when the body is used as a means, that language is distorted and love turns into a lie. Therefore, living sexuality according to God's design is not repression, but liberation, the freedom to love in the way we were meant to love. This teaching challenges us to re-examine how we view love, desire, and human relationships. It calls for a transformation, not just of behavior, but of the heart. Only when we see others as sacred, as icons of the divine, can we love them in truth. And in that love, we find not only personal fulfillment, but a glimpse of the eternal love that God has for humanity. Ultimately, the story of Adam and Eve is not a story of male dominance or female dependence, but a revelation about the human vocation to love. Man and woman, created from one side, are called to stand beside each other, not above or below, and to journey together toward unity. In that journey, through all the challenges of desire, difference, and misunderstanding, love becomes a path of sanctification. Love, then, is not a destination, but a way of life, a calling that encompasses every dimension of our being. It is in love that we discover who we truly are, and through love that we become what we are meant to be.